Hello Year 3, Mrs. Thomas here, and I'm going to be reading Chapter 27 of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Mike Tevee is sent by television. Mike Tevee was even more excited than Grandpa Joe at seeing a bar of chocolate being sent by television. "But Mr. Wonka," he shouted, "can you send other things through the air in the same way? Breakfast cereal, for instance." "Oh, my sainted aunt," cried Mr. Wonka, "don't mention that disgusting stuff in front of me. Do you know what breakfast cereal is made of? It's made of all those little curly wooden shavings you find in pencil sharpeners." "But could you send it by television if you wanted to do as you do chocolate?" asked Mike Tevee. "Of course I could." "And what about people?" asked Mike Tevee. "Could you send a real live person from one place to another in the same way?" "A person?" cried Mr. Wonka. "Are you off your rocker? But could it be done?" "Good heavens, child, I really don't know. I suppose it could." "Yes, I'm pretty sure it could." "Of course it could. I wouldn't want to risk it, though. It might have some very nasty results." But Mike Tevee was already off and running. The moment he heard Mr. Wonka saying, "I'm pretty sure it could," of course it could, he turned away and started running as fast as he could towards the other end of the room, where the great camera was standing. "Look at me!" he shouted as he ran. "I'm going to be the first person in the world to be sent by television." "No, no, no, no!" cried Mr. Wonka. "Mike!" screamed Mrs. Tevee. "Stop! Come back! You'll be turned into a million tiny pieces." But there was no stopping Mike Tevee now. The crazy boy rushed on, and when he reached the enormous camera, he jumped straight for the switch, scattering Oompa Loompas right and left as he went. "See you later, alligator!" he shouted as he pulled down the switch, and as he did so, he leapt out into the full glare of the mighty lens. There was a blinding flash. Then there was silence. Then Mrs. Tevee ran forward, but she stopped dead in the middle of the room, and she stood there. She stood staring at the place where her son had been, and her great red mouth opened wide, and she screamed, "He's gone! He's gone!" "Great heavens, he has gone!" shouted Mr. Tevee. Mr. Wonka hurried forward and placed a hand gently on Mrs. Tevee's shoulder. "We shall have to hope for the best," he said. "We must pray that your little boy will come out unharmed at the other end." "Mike!" screamed Mrs. Tevee, clasping her head in her hands. "Where are you?" "I'll tell you where he is," said Mr. Tevee. "He's whizzing around above our heads in a million tiny pieces." "Don't talk about it," wailed Mrs. Tevee. "We must watch the television set," said Mr. Wonka. "He may come through any moment." Mr. and Mrs. Tevee and Grandpa Joe and little Charlie and Mr. Wonka all gathered around the television and stared tensely at the screen. The screen was quite blank. "He's taken a heck of a long time to come across," said Mr. Tevee, wiping his brow. Oh dear," said Mr. Wonka. "I do hope that no part of him gets left behind." "What on earth do you mean?" asked Mr. Tevee sharply. "I don't wish to alarm you," said Mr. Wonka, "but it does sometimes happen that only about half the little pieces find their way into the television set. It happened last week. I don't know why, but the result was that only half a bar of chocolate came through." Mrs. Tevee let out a scream of horror. "You mean only half of Mike is coming back to us?" she cried. "Let's hope it's the top half," said Mr. Tevee. "Hold everything," said Mr. Wonka. "Watch the screen. Something's happening." The screen had suddenly begun to flicker. Then some wavy lines appeared. Mr. Wonka adjusted one of the knobs and the wavy lines went away. And now, very slowly, the screen began to get brighter and brighter. "Here he comes!" yelled Mr. Wonka. "Yes, that's him all right." "Is he all in one piece?" cried Mrs. Tevee. "I'm not sure," said Mr. Wonka. "It's too early to tell." Faintly at first, but becoming clearer and clearer every second, the picture of Mike Tevee appeared on the screen. He was standing up and waving at the audience and grinning from ear to ear. "But he's a midget!" shouted Mr. Tevee. "Mike!" cried Mrs. T. "Are you all right? Are there any bits of you missing?" "Isn't he going to get any bigger?" shouted Mr. Tevee. "Talk to me, Mike!" cried Mrs. Tevee. "Say something! Tell me you're all right!" A tiny little voice, no louder than the squeaking of a mouse, came out of the television set. "Hi, Mum," it said. "Hi, Pop. Look at me. I'm the first person ever to be sent by television." "Grab him," ordered Mr. Wonka. "Quick!" Mrs. Tevee shot out a hand and picked the tiny figure of Mike Tevee out of the screen. "Hooray!" cried Mr. Wonka. "He's all in one piece. He's completely unharmed." You call that unharmed? Snapped Mrs. Tevee, peering at the little speck of a boy who was now running to and fro across the palm of her hand, waving pistols in the air. He was certainly no more than an inch tall. He shrunk, said Mr. Tevee. Of course he shrunk, said Mr. Wonka. What did you expect? This is terrible, wailed Mrs. Tevee. What are we going to do? And Mr. Tevee said, We can't send him back to school like this. He'll get trodden on. He'll get squashed. He won't be able to do anything, cried Mrs. Tevee. Oh, yes, I will, squeaked the tiny voice of Mike Tevee. I'll be able to watch television. Never again, said Mr. Tevee. I'm throwing the television set right out of the window the moment we get home. I've had enough of television.